Welcome back to session 6 and the last session in this module, where we'll be talking about connecting the modern organization. This section aims to give an overview of the total cost of ownership when making procurement decisions. It describes the role of free and open source software, particularly in terms of localization. It describes the role of modern database management and information systems in an organization, and it describes the role of internet-based interconnectivity methods in an organization. We also outline some of the policy considerations relevant to connecting the modern organization. Now, out of all these, I will again request that you refer to the manuscript, because I will not cover database management in this online session that we're doing. As well, for further information, you will really need to refer to the manuscript. So this will just give you an overview about some of the concepts and ideas and policy issues around it. So we all agree that information technology is an important part of today's modern organization. And why is it so? Is because it provides us with an improved process control. It provides better management and operational efficiency. So, you know, it is then important that we make the right decisions when choosing hardware and software. Particularly, we need to be mindful of current technology as well as how technology is going to evolve. So there's no point buying obsolete technology, particularly if you know that the rest of your systems are going to be evolving into more advanced systems at a very in the near term. So the total cost of ownership is basically the effective cost of a product over its lifetime, and this should really be taken into consideration when you are making procurement considerations and decisions. Now, the sort of things that you need to look at are, for example, what's the power consumption of a device? You know, what sort of processing power does it have? How much heat does it produce? Because if you live in a warm climate, or if you are in a warm climate, the amount of heat produced by equipment can be quite substantial, and that will actually have an impact on your air conditioning systems. You know, vice versa, if you live in a cold climate, equipment needs to run at a certain temperature to be efficient, and you'll need to increase the general temperature or operating temperature of those systems to keep it running optimally. So I won't get into further detail here, but please do refer to the manuscript, and you will also see a lot of references online which talks about total cost of ownership and some of the choices you have available and the processes you need to follow. So the takeaway from this is that, you know, you need to be mindful of the concept of total cost of ownership, particularly when you come when you are making decisions, particularly policy decisions around, you know, what you buy and what you don't buy, and how you buy it, what you deploy, what you don't deploy. So please try and look into TCO concepts a bit more and see how it can make a difference to your organization. Free and open source software, you know, for the developing world, cost is always an issue. And when we talk about ICT systems, you know, there's always a limited number of money or amount of money available to spend on ICT systems. And when it comes to software, sometimes the software costs are as much as, if not more than, hardware costs. So what does FOST do for us then? Well, it offers the advantage of low or near zero upfront cost. I won't say zero upfront cost, because there's always some sort of cost associated with either downloading software or getting it on a CD and whatnot. One of the prime principles behind FOST is that it offers free access to source code for customization and/or localization. And it also potentially offers better security in terms of its software coding, because you have a community of people who are working around the product. You're not limited to one company or vendor doing it. So, you know, if one group of people are not interested in trying to secure the system, perhaps another group will be. Whereas when it comes to a company or a single vendor, if they're the only ones working on the product, they might have other priorities, they might have some commercial restrictions, and they may be only able to commit so much resources for the development and tweaking of a product. So that's where perhaps FOST could have an advantage. Now, in terms of localization, we'll talk about localization a bit more shortly. But you know, it does offer you that option that you can localize things, you can customize it to, you know, as you please. One of the requirements, of course, of FOST is that if you do make changes to the code, you need to contribute back to the community. So you can't take free and open source software, make some changes to it, and then keep it to yourself, because that's not how it works. That's not what the principle behind it is. So you need to contribute back to the community, and again, you need to, in other words, you're sharing your knowledge again. That's what it's all about. The 4 solutions available today include quite a lot of things: web browsers, office productivity software, database systems, web server technology, financial accounting software, amongst many other things. So if you do have a look on the internet, you do a search for free and open source software. SourceForge.net is an interesting site to look at. It provides links and information on a whole range of free and open source software systems, which you can download and try out and see if it suits your needs. You can perhaps deploy it within your own systems. Now, how can FOSS fit into your organization? Well, one way to do it is a straight-out substitution, where you take a FOSS application and you use it to replace a proprietary commercial product. As an example, you could use OpenOffice to replace Microsoft Office, provided it meets your needs, of course. You can adopt FOSS as the application of choice in a new deployment. For example, if you are installing a new web server, instead of using a commercial web server software application on it, you can use what's known as an Apache web server, which is free and open source. In fact, a point to note here is that a large number of web servers in the world today actually run Apache rather than any other commercial type product. You can migrate applications to a FOSS platform. For example, you can move from a Microsoft Windows or Unix-based server system to a Linux-based server system. Now, do keep in mind that just because it's Linux, it's free. That's not really the case. Usually there are no upfront costs in buying the software, but you need to resource yourselves to actually support the software. Perhaps you will need assistance in deploying it, in configuring it, in customizing it. So there is a cost involved with it, and you need to be mindful of that fact, and you need to balance it out accordingly. So if someone says that FOSS software is free, yes, it sort of is, but it's not really. So you need to be careful of that, and you need to understand what's free and what's not free, and that you still need to have support systems in place which will actually support FOSS software, which will obviously come at a cost. Now, what can FOSS do in terms of localization? Well, usually commercial products will only localize a product to local languages if there is sufficient commercial motivation for them. That means they need to have a sufficient enough user base, a sufficient commercial incentive to go and localize a product into a particular language. Now, in instances where there is not a sufficient user base for a company to have commercial success with localization, FOSS can be a solution. Because you have access to source code, which anyone can modify, you could have a group of motivated individuals who realize that there is some merit in localizing a piece of software or an application into their local language or script, and then they would then contribute as a community group in making it happen. So that's one manner in which FOSS can be used in terms of localization. Other things that localization can do is that it can help build local technical capacity. It can potentially reduce imports of software because you are using locally developed software or locally modified software which is based on free software in the first place. It can help bridge the linguistic digital divide, and of course it can generally contribute to local ICT capacity building and with people being trained and upskilled into new and perhaps emerging technologies, which of course then can be applied back in a commercial sense where you could perhaps set up an outsourcing industry and so on. Moving on, let's talk about software as a service. Now, software as a service exists as a software delivery platform, and it's all about making a software application available over the internet. Usually, in most instances, there's really nothing to install. Your web browser becomes your interface into that program or that application. The typical business model for these type of services is that the software is not actually sold to you. Users will pay a subscription fee to use the software. There is usually little or no investment in infrastructure required, other than reliable internet access. Things like updates and upgrades are done at the server end, so they're actually transparent to the user. And it really allows an organization to concentrate on its core business And for most organizations, their core business is not supporting information technology. It's either providing a service or providing a product or selling something or retailing, manufacturing, and so on. And sometimes an organization spends a significant amount of resources into supporting information technology systems. And really, software as a service is an opportunity or is a possibility where you can use services provided by a service provider. They handle everything, updates, upgrades, and so on, and even technical support. And you concentrate, or your organization concentrates on doing whatever its core business is. Now, you will see a link to a video clip which is provided in the slides. This video clip is courtesy of the good folks at InfoWorld, and it's a nice little clip which describes to you what software as a service actually is. So I'd invite you to type that URL into a web browser and have a look at it. I think it's about 2 minutes long. It really gives you a good overview of what SaaS is all about and how it's evolved. So please, if you do have the time, do have a look at that little video clip. Moving on to internets. So the internet is basically a play on the word internet. We know the internet is a global network of networks. And internet is internal to an organization, and it's usually built using internet technologies, and then usually also have a similar functionality and look and feel as does an internet system of a similar nature. Typically, you would only make an internet available to an organization's employees, so you'd make it available to your own staff. It may be accessed through the public internet or using a secure login or VPN, or you may choose to make it a private internal network which has no real access from the outside world. So it really depends on the circumstances you're in. An extranet is a spin on intranets, and here you need to open up your internet to the outside world, and you perhaps will want to allow some trusted third parties to access an internet with some limited privileges. Now, these trusted third parties could be people like your customers or vendors, people you buy things off, so that your customers may be able to track orders, your vendors may be able to collect purchase orders and so on from you using your extranet. So again, it provides a lot of functionality or greater functionality and perhaps convenience to you and organizations and partners you deal with. Now, internets are becoming an important tool for progressive organizations. More and more they're being used for internal communications and collaboration. One of the greatest advantages of an internet, of course, is that it's able to provide on-time and most current information, particularly when it concerns internal information to a company. For example, you may have some internal policies, an acceptable user policy, perhaps some employment-related policies that needs to be updated from time to time. So instead of printing it out and giving it out to every employee, you can point them to the internal company internet and say, please go and look here, we've got a new version online, ensure that you are up to date with it, and so on. It also provides a good facility to share internal company information. This could be product catalogs, it could be process documents or workflow documents, and so on and so forth, which you don't really want to make open for public consumption, but you want to have it available for your own internal purposes and own internal use. So the internet can become a very important tool or an important ICT tool in the day-to-day life of an organization. Now, when we're talking about internet, we talked about VPNs. So what are VPNs? VPN stands for Virtual Private Networks. They're a convenient and secure way to interconnect an organization's geographically separate offices or to allow remote users access to internal information. Now, how a VPN works is that it creates a secure tunnel through a communications medium, for example, the internet, and it allows two or more locations to connect to each other through this communications medium. All sites in a VPN usually work seamlessly as if they're part of one network. And if you use an internet-based VPN, this can significantly reduce the costs. And of course, you can replace lease lines in the process, because normally you will see that a lease line has a lot of costs associated with it. You have to buy routers, you have to have people trained to run and operate them, or outsource to an outside company to do that for you. These lines usually take more time to install. They're usually more expensive on a monthly basis. And moving to an internet-based system or internet-based VPN system, you can have actually significant cost reductions in your operating costs for your organization. Another advantage of VPNs are that they have the ability to quickly provision connection to a new site. You only really need functional internet connection and the relevant hardware and software available between the sites to have your VPN up and running. Another great advantage of a VPN is that, let's say if you have a sudden increase in demand, you need to increase your internet bandwidth. Really all you need to do is contact your service provider and say, hey, look, I was on 512K before, and I now want this to be 1 meg. And for them, it should take a couple of minutes for them to provision that for you, and you should be up and running shortly after that. So, it offers that ability to very quickly scale up or scale down, for that matter. If you don't really need that sort of speed anymore, you can scale up or down. It's really up to you and what your needs are. VPNs are also able to guarantee performance levels to various services and applications. For example, you may want to allocate some fixed bandwidth resources to certain applications, like perhaps voice over IP or voice calls between your locations, or perhaps you have some database access requirements which require certain guaranteed performance levels. So a VPN will actually allow you to set guaranteed performance levels, or let's call it quality of service levels, to ensure that your applications and programs keep on running as they should. Usually you will find that capital expenditures reduce the requirements for a VPN are usually cheaper than that for lease lines. And there's also potential to reduce operating expenditure by outsourcing support and even the actual VPN provision to third parties. Now, obviously, this is not available in all markets, but in markets that they are available, they are perhaps something that one may consider when considering how to hook up different locations within your organization. One of the greatest advantages, of course, is that VPNs provide the potential to access the organization's internal network from just about anywhere in the world. As long as you have an internet connection, you should be able to connect back to your organization's internal network and do whatever is required for you or of you. The next slide you'll see will show you an example of a VPN, which is configured over the internet. So you will see that you have an office, and you have a couple of branch offices, and you also have a business partner, in this case a customer. And each of these locations has a VPN router. The links in red, so all these connect to each other over the internet. The red links or the red lines on that graphic, what they depict is that that's a secure link running between the VPN routers over the internet. And you can also obviously have remote access and connect up to the network in that manner. One thing to keep in mind is that a lot of the traffic on the internet is actually viewable by people if they're smart enough. So a VPN ensures that the data you transmit over your network is secure, it's encrypted. So all people will see is just the stream of rubbish flowing past. They won't actually be able to see what actual information you're passing back and forth. Now, VPNs are a powerful application. So you really need to have appropriate usage policies in place, particularly to prevent misuse and protect information. Keep in mind that through a VPN you are actually providing access to an organization's internal information and systems. Therefore, security is very, very important. Some ways you can do this: you can provide user-level access to internal resources. So, for example, you could have various levels within an organization depending on the sensitivity or confidentiality levels of the information in question. So, for example, executive management could have all types of access. Middle management would have a different set of access. Departmental heads would have different level of access, and general staff would have a different level of access. And as an example, for the CEO or for the executive management, you may allow them to access all payroll information and contractual information, whereas perhaps general staff, you may not allow them access to that sort of information. Another possibility is that you use multiple VPNs. Most VPN routers and systems have the ability to create multiple concurrent VPNs running at the same time. So in that manner, you can set up one VPN for general access and a series of other levels of access depending on the privileges required. So as an example, executive management access using one type of VPN, middle management through another, general staff through another, and customers and vendors through yet another VPN. Cost-wise, it really doesn't cost you all that much more, because usually the one device will be able to support multiple VPNs, and it's just a matter of configuring it. Now, there are some policy considerations coming out of this section. Let's just very briefly go through them. There is a need to ensure that procurement and purchasing decisions are made taking into account technology trends as well as the life cycle of the system, including its total cost of ownership, or TCO. You might want to assess the benefit of adopting free and open source software in terms of economic savings, as well as the potential to localize software to suit local conditions and perhaps to contribute to building ICT capacity in country. You may want to consider the use of new and emerging application delivery methods, as an example, software as a service, which requires less in-house technical resources to operate and maintain. And perhaps you may want to look at enterprise resource planning tools to provide whole of organization application integration and access, just to make life easier all around when it comes to running an organization. You might want to explore the potential offered by internets as an organizational information resource, and connecting remote locations and offices using virtual private network or VPNs as a means to economize interconnectivity costs.